We are back. Hope you're all well. What is up, everyone? Now, I thought it'd be a good thing to go through some more disease stuff. I've had a few comments, or quite a few comments and messages recently regarding parasites and diseases and bacterial infections and blah, 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 blah. Now, the majority of the time, these are probably 5, maybe 6, no, I reckon 4 or 5 different ailments. It's a bit like the common cold with us. It's probably the most common thing you get. And it's the same with fish. There's sort of 4 or 5 that they get regularly. So I thought it'd be really good to do a quick, concise video on sort of how to identify them and what sort of things you're going to have to do to treat them, and how quickly it can take hold. But anyway, I thought it'd be good to give you guys a head start on tackling, treating, IDing these 5 different, maybe 5, 6, 4 different ailments your fish can get. Now, one thing to bear in mind with parasites and funguses and bacterial infections is they can look different on a lot of different fish. Whether they affect the fins, the face, the body, it can look quite different from fish to fish. So it's always worth, when you think that you've ID'd it, going to Google or other search engine and just going through images, type in fungal infection on a tetra, or just type in fungal infection aquarium fish, and just scroll through the photos. It's not the nicest thing to do, but it gives you an idea of how different things can look on different fish. And that way you can just get a positive ID, well, as close to positive as you can really get. Now, a big shout out goes out to NT Labs. NT Labs have actually, I messaged them the other day, and they sent me all the high resolution shots of the, they do what do they call it? A disease, hang on, let me look it up. Right, so they call it an aquarium disease map. Hey, Matt, good name. So what it is it's like a poster that they do with all the different diseases, and it's got these computer generated sort of pictures of how the parasite bacteria look. I'll try and link actually that. I'll see if I can find the downloadable one online, and I'll link it into the description, because it's a really good little tool to have, whether you print it out or save it onto your computer. You can just have it there ready to go. But they've sent me over all the images from that poster, so I'm going to overlay them as we go through, because generally, obviously, I don't keep pictures of fish with diseases. That's why I say to use Google, because there's thousands of people that have had the problems before, and they can go out and they can take photos and they can upload them, and you can just see all these different types of parasite, fungus, whatever you're looking at. But yeah, I'll overlay the NT Labs photos up, just so that then you can see a rough idea of what I'm talking about, whether it be bacteria or parasites. While I was talking to NT Labs as well, they actually spoke to me about doing a giveaway. We haven't put everything fully down and on paper. We haven't sort of sorted everything out, but we are talking about doing a giveaway, which would be my first one on the channel. That would be really cool. It will be done through me and through them, so don't start looking at any other profiles. If anyone starts messaging you about you've won something, you will not get a message from them. It'll only be through me or through NT Labs, depending on how we work it out. But yeah, watch out on my channel and on NT Labs channel, because there will be some sort of giveaway for the month of December, and we'll work something out. So I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, massive shout out to the guys and girls working at NT Labs. You guys are awesome. Before I properly get into this, obviously sick fish, it has to come from somewhere. Whether that be a water quality issue that has stressed the fish out and they've got a bit under the weather, whether it be that you've sort of bought new fish, and a lot of people blame new fish for bacteria and parasites and problems and things like that. What you do find is, obviously, you've got a closed system. This is a closed system. All these fish have been together for a while now, and they are used to, or they have caught different parasites over their lifetime. Different bacteria are in there, and they'll be used to them, almost immune to them in a way, I suppose. Now, when you put new fish in there, they're going to be bringing in bacteria and parasites and all sorts of different things, possibly, that these guys haven't ever encountered and can't fight off as quickly. So as much as putting new fish in can cause a problem, it's not always worth going back to the shop and shouting and hollering. Go and talk to them. Most of the time, like I say, it's a cross-contamination thing. You may even find it's your fish that have given the new fish something, because again, once you sort of lock these guys away for 6 months and then you go and introduce new fish, well, it's just a pot of different problems that could become an issue, but it shouldn't if you take the precautionary steps and keep an eye on your fish. So you've got to ask yourself before you start throwing treatments or changing the temperature or whatever, you've got to ask yourself, what's happening in my aquarium? Have I just done a big water change? Have I introduced new fish, like I just said? Have I cleaned out the filter? Did I say that one? No. Have I cleaned out the filter? Is the heater working? You've got to check all of these things first, because without those things working properly or being clean, or your water not testing correctly, they could just be having a stressful effect on the fish. And you fix them, yes, you'll probably still need to treat the fish, but you may fix the problem. If you don't fix the problem first, you could be treating and nothing getting better, because the thing that's causing it is still in your fish tank. As I touched upon in that last thing, I would say 80 to 90% of the problems that we face and that I deal with in the store is water quality. The majority of them are problems with your water quality. So whether that's, a big water change has been done and it's upset the sort of bacteria in the filter and in the tank, or you cleaned out your filter too thoroughly and all the bacteria has died off and now you've got an ammonia spike, or you've not water changed your tank enough and you've got a massive nitrate spike because your tank's a little bit older. Most of the time it does come from there. So always make sure you test your water with a water testing kit. Obviously, you've probably seen my videos. I use the NT Labs water testing kits. They're just easy and simple. I'll link the video down in the description so you can go and watch that if you haven't done already. But I go through the entire kit and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, always test your water just to make sure that, again, before you're chucking any treatment in there, it's actually going to work and there's nothing wrong in the tank. Right, so let's start. We're going to start at number 5. We're going to count down from number 5 to number 1. I'm going to start with the one that I think customers used to ask me the most about, and what one was the most popular. It's probably not popular. No aquarium disease or parasite is popular. So yeah, let's start at number 5, and we'll count down all the way to number 1 to the most popular problem, illness, sickness that you get in your aquarium. So coming in at number 5, we are going to go with swimbladder problems or swimbladder infection. Now, swimbladder infections show themselves as a fish not being able to maintain buoyancy, floating, listing to one side, maybe trying to sort of wedge itself under a rock or under a wood to try and keep underneath the water. But yeah, it's generally them not being able to maintain their sort of balance in the water. So if you're worried about your fish having a swimbladder infection, if it's, like I say, floating on the surface, not being able to swim down, so on and so on, then I'll be looking at a swimbladder treatment. It's fairly simple, does what it says on the tin. Now, most of the time, these are something called aquaflavin. Now, at home, I keep pretty much the majority of treatments in my cupboard. For me, spending £35 to £40 every 2 to 3 years on bottles of treatment means I've got them in stock in the house. £30 to £40 worth of fish is really not a lot. It's, a shoal of cardinal tetras, pretty much. And if you've got that treatment at home that you can then chuck in and get running straight away, rather than waiting till the fish shop opens the next day, or, when you finish work in 2 days' time and then you can get it, or when Amazon can get it out to you, at least you've got the treatment there. I wouldn't say everyone needs it, but I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, 7. I've got a lot of fish tanks set up in the house. Like I say, for the sake of a £5 treatment sitting in the cupboard, they've always got long dates on them. I don't mind it. But anyway, as I was saying, swimbladder treatment. So I use, if I've ever got this problem, I use NT Labs swimbladder treatment. So that is a aquaflavin-based treatment. It's sort of like an antibacterial. It has got other things in it as well. Sorry, I've just rattled it near the microphone. But it has got other things in it too to help them sort of get over any problems with their swim bladder. If the swim bladder treatment doesn't work, it might be worth visiting a few other things. Like I say, I would always get the treatment in there just to make sure you're covering that, because you don't want the infection to stay and to get worse. But you might be looking at things like, have they gulped in too much air at the surface when they're feeding? Looking at you fancy goldfish, they are constantly doing that. If you're feeding a floating food or a semi-floating food, they can come up, gulp loads of air in, and then essentially get air trapped inside them, which means they float. If your fish are constantly sort of being buoyant one day and non-buoyant the next, and yeah, they're flip-flopping between that, it's probably a food issue. If they've got that sort of floating tendencies for a few days, it's probably an infection. So coming in at number 4, we are going to go with fin rot. This is quite a popular one, and again, popular, not popular, common. where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so yeah, quite often customers come in and say, oh, I've got fin rot, but it can be other things. So it's not always necessarily fin rot. Now, as I'm going to say probably a few times throughout this video, make sure you've tested your water before throwing any of these treatments in. Fin rot and problems with the fins can be caused by poor water quality, so always make sure you test your water before doing any of this. But fin rot sort of displays itself, I suppose, as sort of red, sore-looking, feathery fins. So, you know, if you think of a fish's fin as my hand, that's its tail. Each one of my fingers is the bone running through the fish's tail. Now, what happens is these start to, this sort of skin between them breaks up and it ends up looking a bit wavy and a bit feathery. Now, this can easily be confused with fin nipping. So if you've got a bit more of an aggressive fish, or something like guppies are always very targeted by other fish because they're long, bright fins, and betters as well, actually. They're always targeted because, well, it just looks appealing. So don't always sort of go out and think it's fin rot. It may just be fin nipping, so it's worth paying attention to your fish and just seeing if there's any aggression going on. Now, even if you can't distinguish between the two, fin rot or fin nipping, that's what I was trying to say, if you can't work out which one it is, the key is you're still going to want to treat. The problem is with any rips or tears or, you know, damage to the fins or the fish, it still can get infected. So what might start off as just a little bit of nipping from another fish can develop into an infection. Very much like us, you know, if we get a cut on our hand, we want to clean it, we want to bandage it or put a plaster over it. And it's the same for fish. Well, not necessarily putting a plaster on it, but you're going to want to make sure you treat it. Now, treating fin rot is fairly simple and fairly easy. You are going to be wanting to look for a fin rot medication. So NT Labs do anti-ulcer and fin rot. There you go. It's got a beautiful guppy on the front of it. Because of their fins, they are probably one of the most prone to this problem. But yeah, you're going to want to use that. Now, the funny thing is, this has acroflavin in it. This has acroflavin in it. The key is they've got other ingredients in them that make them different to each other. But you will find the medications do use similar things throughout. It's just in different dosages and with different additives added to it. So yeah, you're going to be wanting to use an anti-fin rot medication. This is going to stop any infection, any problems, anything getting into the fins, and hopefully it's going to allow them to heal up. As long as the fin hasn't made its way all the way to the body, it should still grow back. I have seen fish where it has got down to the body and it's just sort of healed over and they've just lived life without that fin or with a stub instead of a fin. They can live absolutely fine. But yeah, so as long as you catch it, and the earlier you catch it and the earlier you get that treatment in, the better it will be. So again, that's why I keep it in my cupboard. So coming in at 3, we are going to go with fungal infections. Now, fungal infections actually leads on quite well from fin rot and things like that, because again, it's sort of a secondary infection. What most of the time happens is the fish will get an abrasion or a cut or a split fin, and then what happens is the fungus that's probably already in your aquarium somewhere gets into it, and then you'll get this horrible fluffy wool, sort of cotton wool looking thing coming out of it. And yeah, it just looks nasty. Now, as I've said before, check out on some online image searches, Google and things like that, because you can find funguses do look different on different fish and also can infect pretty much anywhere on the fish. So it might affect around their mouth, it might affect on their back, their body. Even sometimes I've seen some it's mostly in pond fish, to be honest, but I've seen some pond fish where it gets a fungal infection, and then because it's midsummer and there's loads of sunlight and there's loads of nutrients in the water, the fungus on the back of the fish then starts to grow algae, or goes a bit green because the water's green or it's brushed through algae. And customers have come in and said, oh, I think I've got algae growing on my fish, but it's actually a fungal infection that is growing algae. So it's like a green mohawk growing off the back of the fish. If you see a fish in your aquarium or in your pond, in fact, that has got a few missing scales or a ripped fin, but nothing else seems to be bad, it is always worth looking at getting an antifungal treatment in there. What that's going to do, again, is going to stop any infection getting into that wound and taking hold. You're almost like stopping the problem before it becomes a problem. Now, I use... Do you know what? I don't think I've picked up... Oh, I have picked up my antifungus. And I use antifungus and white spot from NT Labs. Again, like I say, I just buy... Well, The NT Labs range is readily available where I am, and it's great treatments. I've been using them for years now, and never had an issue, and they've always worked. So I just fill my cupboard full of NT Labs treatments generally. It's the easiest way for me. But yeah, you would use an anti-white spot and fungus. Now, obviously, the funny thing is this treats two things. As I've said before in this video, a lot of the medications cross over with each other. So this has actually got a same ingredient as the anti-ulcer and fin rot. This one is better at fin rot, this one's better at fungus. But they do still help. So yeah, it's a funny one how they all cross over. I suppose it's like paracetamol and things like that. It helps with a wide range of things. So fungus problems are probably, well, quite an easy one to spot. You're going to see it. It's fluffy, it's horrible, it's nasty. But get the treatment in there, make sure the water quality is good, and it should clean up fairly quickly. Once that fungus is gone, you may still have an open wound on the fish, so it's always worth keeping an eye on it, because if that doesn't heal over quickly, the fungal infection may come back. Coming in at number 2, we are going to go with bacterial infections. Now, bacterial infections can sort of come in many, many different forms. It's probably like me saying coming in at number 2 is flu. It can come in or come at many different varieties. So you can get external bacterial infections. You can get internal bacterial infections where you do not see anything wrong with the fish until, unfortunately, it's possibly dead. Now, as I touched upon, you can get internal bacterial infections that really don't show themselves up as much. Your fish might be a little bit more lethargic, it might be a bit slower, which is lethargic, same thing. It might be sort of sitting on the bottom and a little bit more sort of staying away from the rest of the group. Generally feeling a little bit under the weather, the same as me and you would feel if we get ill. You know, it's probably why it's good to know your fish sort of inside out. I can tell you now, if all 4 of my festive cichlids aren't up at the front glass when I walk past, something's up, something's wrong. And it's the same with a lot of these guys, you know. Some of the babies I wouldn't notice it on so much, but certainly the bigger ones, like my swordtails and stuff, if they're not out at the front, I'm questioning where they are and what's going on. So yeah, it's always worth knowing your fish really well, as odd as that sounds. The other type of bacterial infection that you can get is a little bit nastier, I suppose, but it's an external bacterial infection. Now, this can display itself as, I don't really want to say it, but parts of your fish dying before the fish has died. Sounds horrible, but it almost displays itself as like a white patch that starts to sort of degrade. And again, if it hits their fins first, you'll see them swimming funny because they won't have the use of that. It's almost like that part of their body is paralysed and gone. So yeah, you want to watch out for those. Again, I can spot it a mile off, where if I walk past my tank and someone's not swimming quite right, I can spot it a mile off. I've been doing 15, 20 years or whatever it is, and you just get to know how the fish swim. So it is good to sit in front of your tank, definitely take some time out and just chill and watch the tank, because you'll get to know how everyone moves. But yeah, bacterial infections externally, once you see them, it's probably too late for that fish, but it's always worth getting a treatment in there because it's going to stop it spreading, or hopefully spreading to others. Now again, I've said it before and I'll say it again, if you think it's a bacterial infection, Google it. Go through the photos that are online, have a look through all of them. There's nothing grosser, but there's nothing better than scrolling through 15, 20 photos of the sort of infections and just going, do you know what, actually, that one looks like mine, or this one looks like mine. Because then you're going to get a good idea of what it is and what's going on. Now, to treat any bacterial infection, actually, you're going to be wanting to use an antibacterial treatment. It's fairly simple, fairly easy. Now, again, in my cupboard, I keep anti-internal bacteria from NT Labs. Even though it says internal, it will treat external bacterial infections as well. This medication is what's called chloramine or chloramine T. So yeah, it's a really good treatment for clearing up any infections like that. Again, it will help with other ones. The other treatments possibly will help with bacterial infection, but this is going to do it the best. Now, coming in at number 1, I definitely think this is the most popular one. Most common, not popular. I keep saying popular. No one wants parasites in their fish tank. But coming in at number 1, it is white spot, or ick. Well done, white spot. You have claimed victory. You are victorious in this horrible top 5. But white spot, or like I say, ick as people sometimes call it, is a parasite that infects your fish. It can land anywhere on your fish pretty much, and it doesn't really mind where, and it will display itself as like little sugar grain sized white lumps all over the fish. Now, to sort of simplify white spot, I suppose you would say, what happens is that little white sugar grain lump that you see on your fish is a living being. It will drop off the fish, it will go into the bottom of your tank, it will reproduce into a load more. Those parasites go and find a fish host, they land on the fish, they repeat the cycle, they drop off, they turn into loads more, so on, so on, so on. So white spot can get out of hand very, very quickly in the wrong situation. So as soon as you're seeing those 1 or 2 lumps, you might be like, it's okay, it's only 1 or 2, it's fine. You wake up the next morning and like everyone's covered in it. So it is one that you need to react to fairly quickly, I would say. Now, one thing to bear in mind, if you think you've got white spot, it may not be. There are some fish, goldfish being one of them, and a lot of the sort of barbs and carp and things like that, what they can get is what they call breeding tubercles. Now, they are white spots that appear on the gill plates. I don't know why I'm touching my cheeks, but on the gill plates and on the front edge of the pectoral fins. Now, they display themselves very similarly to white spot, but they'll only be in those 2 areas. It will literally be on the fronts of the fins and the cheeks, and it's only on the male fish generally. A lot of customers do come in and they do say, I've got white spot. What fish is it on? Goldfish. Where is it? And it's always around the gill plates and things like that. So it's always worth sort of making sure that you have got white spot and it's not just breeding season for the fish that are in your aquarium. So like I said, it can infect any area. So bodies, fins, faces, everything like that, white spot can pretty much get everywhere and anywhere. It can stick itself on a fish. So if you decide that you've got white spot, then you're going to be wanting to get a white spot treatment in there fairly quickly. Now, the good thing is, NT Labs have the anti-white spot and fungus that we have already talked about. Now, if I was going to buy any one treatment to have in my cupboard, it would be anti-white spot and fungus. Like I say, for the sake of, £25-30, having those treatments sat in your cupboard, ready and raring to go, is going to be a worthwhile thing. Like I say, they last a while. So yeah, this one I haven't opened yet, and this one's dated 2026, and if you're watching this in the future, it might be past 2026, but this is like 2 years expiry date on it, so it can sit in my cupboard just in case there's a problem that comes up. One thing you may read with white spot is turning up the temperature on your aquarium. Yes, this works. Essentially, it speeds up simplifying it, speeds up the life cycle of the parasite. So what happens is the parasite, rather than taking 2 or 3 days to drop off the fish, it takes 1 day, it drops off the fish, and the treatment can only kill it once it's off of the fish. So yeah, that's why you turn the temperature up. Personally, it's one of those things. Sometimes I have done it, sometimes I haven't. It's probably less stressful for the fish to keep the temperature at the same, as long as your temperature is reading correctly, and it's not too cold in there. It's probably best just to keep the temperature at the same level all the way through. There we go. So there's the top 5 problems or illnesses that I think could kill your fish and how to hopefully solve them with the NT Labs range of treatments that I use at home. Now, a few things to go through just before you disappear and go on to another video. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, so all of these treatments can dye your water funny colours. Greens, yellows, blues, all sorts of weird and wonderful colours. Nothing to worry about as long as you followed the dosages on the back of the bottle. You won't have any problems at all. So all good there. Yeah, don't worry about the coloration. A lot of people do phone up and like, oh my word, my tank's blue. Yeah, it's going to happen, unfortunately. The other things to bear in mind is in your filtration, if you've got carbon or different medias that absorb things, you're going to want to take those out when you're treating. The problem is with them, all you're going to be doing is you're going to be pouring the treatment in, and the carbon in your filter is going to be going amazing and pulling it back out again. So yeah, always make sure you're removing the carbon when you are treating with them. And lastly, oxygen levels. Putting in any foreign liquid into an aquarium is possibly going to have an effect on your oxygen levels in your aquarium. So just make sure that your filter's possibly moved up to the surface, it's bubbling across the top of the water. That way you're going to make sure that there's no problems with oxygen loss while you're treating. I think that's the 3 things that you probably need to worry about. Carbon, I think that's everything you'd need to know, mostly. There we go, another video that hopefully makes fish keeping easier for you. As I say, most of them, if this makes it easier for 1, 2 or 3 of you, and it stops your fish from getting sick, or it helps you ID the problem quicker and know what treatment to get, then that's a win in my book. You know, promoting the fish keeping hobby and building it is my #1 goal. So yeah, hopefully this video has been useful for you. I'll definitely see you in the next one. Don't know what's coming next, actually. Don't think I've got anything planned. So yeah, might go away and have a think about it. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one.